This week marks 20 years since the United States invaded Iraq, and people of color continue to pay a high price for the war, a war that many people did not initially support. Today, streets in Baghdad are filled with Iraqis milling about. Many still hold on to the broken promises made by the U.S. prior to the Iraqi invasion. The mission was to topple Saddam Hussein's regime and find weapons of mass destruction. But what was the benefit for American people of color? Did anything improve for Iraqis or for us? Joining me now to answer that question is Ajamu Baraka. He's a human rights activist and a political analyst. My brother, so good to see you. I started this segment with the question, who benefited from this? I would begin from the moral and political premise that war doesn't benefit anybody but the rich and the powerful. But I want to drill down even more and try to make sense of this war because, black folk, were beating the war drum after 9/11 more than I've ever seen them in maybe American history, and it scared me. And you sent a tweet out that mirrored the message of your article for the Black Agenda Report, and the tweet said, "The U.S. is the greatest threat to world peace and collective humanity." When I saw that, it resonated with me because I would have thought that black folk would have had that analysis and opposed the invasion of Iraq, would have opposed the red line in Syria, even when Obama's the one drawing the line. But for some reason, we got mixed up in this mess too. Help me understand.
Well, Mark, we became Americans. We part of the counter insurgency, counter-revolutionary process in the 1970s was to ensure that there'll never be another generation that produced the Revolutionary Action Movement or the Black Panther Party or the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. And so the process was to basically assimilate us to ensure that we would, in fact, have a perspective that was in line with the perspective of the rulers, of the colonial class that controls this project that we call the United States of America. So when the U.S. Made the argument under George W. Bush that Saddam Hussein represented an international threat, and everybody knows that the U.S. is supposed to be the power that polices the world, then many black people fell in line. We were still traumatized by 9/11, and when they made the erroneous connection between 9/11 and Iraq, then you have the foundation for supporting the war. And remember, the build up to the war coming from the liberal media was massive. There was no oppositional voices. It was all about basically stampeding the entire population into support for this assault on Iraq.
Right, and you make an important point. I would say there were voices of dissent, but they were silenced. They were squashed. I mean, think about even people like Phil Donahue, who went from being a TV giant to completely erased for even raising the question about the war. And then you had far more left-wing media that were erased or called un-American. I mean, you're right. I mean, there was definitely a political machinery that went all the way out to the media, went all the way out to the schools. It was everywhere. It was almost impossible to have a different opinion and be safe. When you say America's a threat to peace everywhere, I want my audience to understand what you mean by that.
That basically, and we have to be just honest about this, that we have a ruling class that has placed at the center of its strategy for maintaining global hegemony, global dominance, this doctrine called full spectrum dominance. That basically what they have said is that they're prepared to use military force in order to maintain their global dominance. And so by committing themselves to militarism, they have then created situations that are now threatening to everyone on this planet. For example, this Ukrainian war, and we connect this Ukrainian war with the adventure in Iraq. In Ukraine, they have painted themselves into a corner, supporting the Ukrainian regime that they put in place in 2014, and saying that basically Ukraine would not be allowed to be defeated. What does that mean? It means basically continue escalation with a nuclear power, talking about the Russian Federation. So the possibility of a confrontation between the U.S. and Russia and into a nuclear confrontation is more pronounced than any other time in U.S. history. People don't understand how threatening this situation is today. So, as long as the U.S. is prepared to pursue military means to maintain their dominance at a time where power is shifting away from them, we are all threatened, because they have made it quite clear that before they lose power, they're prepared to blow up the entire world.
And it's important that you offer this analysis, Ajamu, because, the easy answer is they lied to us. Bush drew connections between Saddam Hussein and terrorists on the ground, particularly Al-Qaeda. That Saddam Hussein was enriching uranium and had weapons of mass destruction, despite the fact that there were hundreds of UN inspectors on the ground in Iraq at the time saying the opposite. Even their own people were saying, wait a minute, listen, they ain't got no weapons. But we could say we were confused and we were tricked. But there's a bigger piece here, which is why I wanted to have this conversation, which is that we're beginning to beat the war drums precisely because, like you said, we're becoming Americans. And the reason why that stuck with me is because when I go to the Middle East, and I talk to people from various countries, and Iraqis are no exception, what folks say is, we expect this from America, but we thought black folk would be different. Black folks stood up against Vietnam. Black folks spoke out in these other wars, and now suddenly y'all are doing the same thing. Explain to people why it's important for black folk to be in solidarity, not with American empire, but with oppressed people around the globe. What does it mean to be internationalist?
Well, that is one of the most disheartening things about what has evolved over the last couple of decades, that around the world, people stood in solidarity with black struggle, because black struggle was, in fact, anti-colonial struggle. But that has shifted somewhat. And people are very much disappointed at the extent to which today African Americans stand with the U.S. state. Part of it can be, a large part of it can be explained by the ascendancy of Barack Obama that sort of solidified the process of the Americanization of the African in the U.S. So the kind of almost innate critical approach to U.S. foreign policies that we always had was almost completely disappeared. So, so you can have a situation under Barack Obama where the U.S. can actually attack a prosperous African nation, talking about Libya, and destroy that nation without any significant opposition from African people in the U.S. It's important that people understand that.
That is mind-blowing and devastating and heartbreaking. But that's why we're here on the 20th anniversary of the war in Iraq, the occupation of Iraq and the illegal invasion of Iraq, talking about this, not just to commemorate what happened, but so that we can actually have an honest conversation about black folk getting back on track with the international community and being in the interest of peace and justice.